the issues affecting Asia's animals and the stories of the people working on their behalf. We'll be taking you on a tour of what's been happening lately in the animal protection space around Asia and also bringing you updates from our huge network of animal protection organizations and our many working groups. Welcome to the Asia for Animals podcast.
Welcome to the Asia for Animals podcast series, Asia's Wildlife Rescuers, where we will meet the incredible people creating a future for Asia's remarkable wildlife. My name is Elliot and I am the lead coordinator of the AFA Sanctuaries and Rescue Centres Coalition. In today's episode, we ask the question, is it possible to stop illegal trade of wild animals? Joining us today is Karmele Llano Sanchez from Yayasan International Animal Rescue Indonesia. Karmele will be sharing with us how they managed to dramatically slow and almost stop the illegal trade of Asia's mysterious slow loris. Welcome, Karmele, to the AFA podcast. Thank you for joining us. How are you today?
Hi, good morning. I'm really good. Thank you. How are you?
Not too bad at all. At the end of 2023, you did this incredible presentation at the Asia for Animals conference in Kuching about you and your team's work in Indonesia on the slow loris trade, and was such an overall positive and good news story that we don't often hear coming from the wildlife trade. And I wanted a chance to share that message with as many people as possible. So really, thank you for coming today. But to begin with, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your work and Yayasan International Animal Rescue Indonesia, their mission and the animals that you work with?
Yes, of course. So I'm a veterinarian. Yeah, I graduated as a veterinarian now quite a long time ago. And it's funny because I came to Indonesia right after finishing my university studies to work as a volunteer, helping medical activities in rescue centers, wildlife rescue centers across Indonesia. And that was back in 2003. And I came for 3 months and then that became over 20 years that I've been here. And I think, well, obviously, you know, one of the shocking findings for me back then, I was a lot younger and didn't have much experience at all. It was to see the really the sad fate of all of these animals that were going into the wildlife trade. I mean, for me, it was quite shocking to see, a really terrible welfare issue, but also obviously a very important conservation issue too, because as we know, a lot of the species that are traded, that are being decimated from the wild, and they are going into this wildlife trade, are endangered species. So I had the feeling that I could contribute as a veterinarian. I could contribute to help wildlife in Indonesia, perhaps more than in any other country here, because, you know, Indonesia is a beautiful country with amazing biodiversity. It's one of the biodiversity hotspots of the planet. And yeah, I had the I felt the call to really help out wildlife here in Indonesia, and this is what I've been doing ever since more than 20 years ago now.
It's absolutely incredible that, you know, fresh out of university, you landed somewhere that really gave you that call. And yeah, I've been to Indonesia before, and it's absolutely stunningly beautiful and has some of the most amazing wildlife and natural landscapes on the planet. But it is facing many threats, whether it be the wildlife trade, deforestation, etc. Could you tell us about the work of Yayasan International Animal Rescue Indonesia and what their mission is in Indonesia and also around the world, and what species you work with?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we started the organization now more than 15 years ago, mostly focused on the rescue of animals, and more specifically primates, and more specifically we started rescuing macaques, slow lorises, and then later we started also rescuing orangutans. We became an organization that was our focus was rescuing animals, rehabilitate them, and try to put them back in the wild. We were rescuing primates, as I said, these three major genus, macaques, common macaques, long-tail macaques, pigtail macaques, slow lorises, different species, and orangutans from Kalimantan. All of these animals that were affected either by wildlife trade, but also habitat loss. And when we initiated the efforts, more focused only on rescuing animals and rehabilitating them, or giving them sanctuary when they couldn't be released, the organization has evolved. And then we soon became aware that rescuing animals was not going to solve the problem. That is, it's almost like when you have the water tap is open and there is water flowing, and you start to stop it rather than just turn off the water. And I think this is also what pushed us to try to look for the root of the problems. If we try to solve the problems why the animals had to be rescued in the first place, then obviously at some point the rescue efforts are not necessary anymore. And I think in general we need to be able to realize that when we have to rescue animals, it's because we have failed. We have failed to the conservation of these animals. We have failed in the protection of animals, because animals will be happy in their forest, in their habitat, without having to be rescued. The other problem is also the rescue and rehabilitation efforts is really hard. It's like it takes a lot of time, effort, funding, and it's not always successful. We have to be honest that not always when we rescue animals and we spend all of this time and effort in rehabilitating them, then they can be successfully reintroduced into the wild. So I think everything that we can do to try to stop animals from having to be rescued in the first place is the way to go. So that's why the organization became more holistic, and now our mission and vision is more like, well, basically a world where animals and humans and animals can live in harmony. Yeah. So how we can actually protect these ecosystems so that the wildlife and all of the animals in these ecosystems can be safe. And for that, we had to move from just only working on animals to now work on people, because the problem of the animals is in people. Animals are just fine if we just leave them alone. And it's actually how we solve the problems of the humans that are living near the animals. This coexistence, to try to aim for a coexistence of between animals and people.
It sounds so simple. The fact that, once we just go hands off and leave animals alone, they know what to do. They can thrive. You also use such an amazing analogy there of needing to turn off the tap, because otherwise rescue centers right across Asia and the world just act as a cog in the wheel of just like bringing animals in, putting animals out. And as soon as you take one, release it to the wild or put it in sanctuary, another one comes in to fill its place. And that's what I think was really so amazing about your presentation that you presented about your work on the slow loris trade. That was really resounding, is that you changed Yari's mission to not just be that cog in the wheel, but to actually stop it, to turn off that tap. So before we get into that, because I find it such an amazing story, I've had maybe the sad privilege of working with slow lorises in my career, but many of our listeners may not know what a slow loris is. Could you try to describe how quirky and cryptic and interesting and fascinating slow lorises are for everyone listening.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's maybe one of the big problems of slow loris is to be so cute, and this is also one of the reasons why they are so popular in the wildlife trade. But just more from the biological point of view, slow loris are prosimian primates. They are nocturnal, and they are also amongst the there are slow lorises are amongst the two only genus of primates that have poison, that are poisonous. And and this is a quite amazing characteristic of these primates. Basically, slow lorises have a venom that they can inject into their prey through their teeth, and they have very fine and sharp teeth that they can inject the venom going to the bloodstream, and causes not only a lot of pain, it can cause necrotizing wounds, and also in some people can cause a really dangerous anaphylactic reaction. So we have the cute animal with big eyes that probably people have seen it anywhere, in pictures, or even in directly. They will say, what a cute animal, but behind this cute animal there is a quite dangerous creature that can cause quite some damage through their venomous bite.
It's so amazing just to hear these stories of all these remarkable species around the world. Like, that's such an amazing evolutionary adaptation, right? To as a primate, completely left of field, develop venom and that way of defending yourself or looking for prey. Like, it's absolutely incredible. But some of the features you describe about loris is that they are cute. They move slowly. They've got these giant eyes, and I guess that makes why they are such popular pets, and you see them so frequently in the trade.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. I think we know. One of the things that we understood when we started looking, more in depth on why these animals were being traded so much. I mean, obviously, the obvious answer is they are very cute, but why people will be so prone to want to buy them in the markets? Because the reality is that most people that we interviewed, and I'm talking to you, we started interviewing owners of slow lorises 15 years ago, most of the times they didn't know what a loris was. They were not aiming to go to the market to buy a loris. They were just looking at a cute animal that, they thought, oh, it's so cute, and they just bought it. So the visual effect on people, when specifically now in our age, in our times now, where people can watch these animals online, in social media platforms, and it creates a desire from these people to buy them and to have them as pets. So we realized that the fact that slow lorises were being sold everywhere, and back then I'm talking to you about 15 years ago, if you went to Jakarta, in some of the touristic streets, people would offer slow lorises to buy. In all markets, bird markets, you had slow lorises on sale. So that in itself created kind of an increase in the demand for these animals as pets. So yeah, I mean, again, their cuteness has been a reason for them to end up in a really bad place. The other huge problem of this venomous bite, which obviously the traders knew very well. Traders used to cut the teeth of these lorises. And cutting, I mean like just using pliers or like sometimes just nail cutters to just crack the teeth of the slow lorises so that they wouldn't bite, which obviously, because the bite of slow loris could really deter people from wanting to buy them.
Oh.
So we found, I mean,
touched my teeth, going like, oh, that's so like that must be so horribly painful. Like, I'm imagining my own teeth being cut. It must be horrendous, and it goes to show how horrible the wildlife trade can be and the welfare considerations for these poor animals.
Well, and it's not only the moment where the animals had these teeth cut, but it's also then to have these infections, teeth infections that you can imagine, I mean, for a long time, and that actually, in my opinion, has been one of the major causes of the death of so many slow lorises traded. I mean, maybe just being kept as pets, or even the ones that had the opportunity to be rescued when they didn't have proper medical treatment for their broken teeth and their infections, teeth infections, then, most of them will die. I mean, you can imagine how painful that might be. And yeah, I mean, all of the other problems that caused to these poor animals. So yes, indeed, cruelty, it's like the only way to describe it.
Yeah, it sounds absolutely really sickening. And I guess many people who go to the market or purchase these animals don't really think about the cruelty behind it, or what may actually go into what it takes to capture an animal out of the wild, what it takes for it to be people friendly in inverted commas. When they're just looking at an animal and it looks like this cute Pixar cartoon, and they're like, oh, I've seen this on social media, I've seen this in almost like a Disney film, it's just something that's cute that I want to keep. How challenging is it then to rehabilitate lorises? And it also sounds like if those who were, would you say, fortunate enough to survive go into sanctuary, how challenging is it to look after and rehabilitate lorises?
So, well, one of the main challenges was for us to actually have to deal with all of these teeth problems. Yeah, I mean, they suffer from terrible medical conditions. Yeah, mostly caused by the infections, and sometimes caused generalized infections. But also the fact that when they were traded in really large numbers, and I'm talking to you like we used to receive confiscations of 20, 30, 50, even up to 100 and nearly 150 slow lorises in just one shipment. They all cramped in small crates, and where actually these animals used to bite each other. And again, as I explained at the beginning, that this venom can cause really terrible necrotizing wounds. We had to also deal with the wounds that had been caused during transportation when these animals were put all together in cramped cages. So, the conditions that we used to receive these slow lorises in were so appalling that, very often they couldn't be saved. And the ones that could survive that process and went through the rehabilitation, then if sometimes we had to remove all of their teeth, because, obviously they only had like cracked teeth inside their gums. So they were left without teeth and able to be released back into the wild. And for all of the other animals that still had their teeth, we kept them at the center for a period of time and conduct observations. And then once we knew that they were ready to be released, we will reintroduce them back to the wild. And we have done throughout the years really intense monitoring post-reintroduction of these slow lorises, which is being an amazing job, to be honest, because they are nocturnal and they are called very wrongly slow lorises. They are not slow at all. So these teams of people were following these slow lorises at night, for many hours, then using radio tracking equipment. Obviously, without the radio tracking equipment, it would be impossible. Following throughout the forest and trying to really ensure that they will survive and collecting their behavioral data and their home ranges. The success rate is being quite, different across the different sites where we have released these slow lorises. But we are pretty confident surely more than 50 to 60% of the slow lorises that we released managed to survive. Which, obviously, you always aim for 100% of them. But again, rehabilitation and reintroduction is really tough. It's very hard. These animals have to readapt to a new environment. They have gone through very traumatizing experiences. Then they also have to deal with the problems of being in a new habitat where they have not been before. And sometimes, have also a problem, with predators. We have had quite a lot of slow lorises being lost by, being eaten by predators, which again, I guess that is a much more natural cause of death rather than dying in a small cage in the hands of a trader, right? So I think all in all, we are happy that we have managed to save the lives of many, many slow lorises that otherwise they will have suffered immensely from pain and lack of proper care and will have died. So, even if we didn't manage to save them all, I think we can be super happy with the results.
Yeah, I think it's really impressive. You started working with slow lorises in 2008, roughly, if I remember correctly. What are some of the big sort of statistics? Like, how many lorises do you think you've rescued during that time? How many may have been rehabilitated? How many had to end up in sanctuary? How many passed away? I'm putting you on the spot here, but if you have ballpark figures to give a sort of scale of what this trade was that you were dealing with when you first started and over the last decade and a half.
You've got me. I will need to look it up. I think we've rescued something like more than 1,500 slow lorises in the time that we have been rescuing lorises. I couldn't give you numbers of more like.
That's fine. But 1,500 is incredible. Like 1,500 is it's a massive number. Like, if it is that's 100 lorises a year. That's 2 lorises a week if we average it out. But you did say they often come in sad consignments of hundreds of lorises or 100 lorises. So it sounds very much like you were very quickly overwhelmed with the number of animals that you were receiving. And as you were saying before, that like you were just a cog in the wheel. When was the moment that Yari thought, we need to turn off the tap? We are just acting as a cog in the wheel here. We need to stop these animals coming to us rather than just rescuing consistently.
So pretty much very soon after we started rescuing lorises back in 2007, 2008, we realized that, just only with animals being confiscated and then animals being handed over by owners, we were completely overwhelmed with the problem because there was not enough facilities. We were always adding more cages and more and more and more, but it would be impossible. At some point, we had to stop refusing to rescue lorises. We decided, it was a really hard decision. I will never forget how I felt, basically having to refuse, knowing that those animals will have a really horrible fate. But it was, we had to make the commitment to only accept animals that were coming from confiscations. So basically, we committed to help the government in the efforts to confiscate animals and to really, tackle the root of the problem. Because at that point, there were so many people having slow lorises as pets that were overwhelming us, coming with their lorises because they didn't want to take care of them anymore. And we thought that it was also unfair for us, obviously, because, obviously, there was not, this is, we were doing all our best and we couldn't help them all. So we started focusing on just confiscated slow lorises. And even then, the situation was quite overwhelming in itself, because, as I said, we will be receiving confiscations of dozens of slow lorises and even more than 100 slow lorises in one shipment. This is the moment that we realized that we needed to do something about the root of the problem, because otherwise it could have been forever, to keep receiving more animals and to be overwhelmed with not being able to house them all.
When you first started, you obviously knew that there was a challenge with lorises in the wildlife trade, but did you expect it to be as big as what you're describing now, with thousands of animals and eventually heartbreakingly having to say no?
No, obviously not. When you set up a rescue center, I don't know, at least I speak for myself, you expect that you are going to be able to rescue, especially when you focus on one species, because I think there are a lot of rescue centers out there that receive all different animals, and, which I think that's, amazing, but, it's also so difficult. But when we made the commitment to focus on slow lorises, it felt really bad that we had to refuse them. And actually, I have to say that also the public didn't respond very well. I think they were, it was a really hard time, because I think people started to think that we were not serious enough, but at the same time, as I said before, I think they were being really unfair, because they were causing the problem buying those lorises in the first place. Very often we found people that were that had the discourse that they were rescuing lorises from trade. Obviously, they were more causing a problem, because the demand is always related to the numbers that are hunted from the wild, right? Like, you have a higher demand, more people will be out there hunting them, capturing them, and putting them on the trade. So there is this cycle that, where people are responsible 100%, all of those people that go to a market and buy an animal, they are perpetuating that problem, because that person that is selling that animal to you has seen a business. Every time that you are buying any wild animal, exotic animal in a market, you are basically helping, motivating, and perpetuating the problem of illegal wildlife trade.
It's holistically just challenging and depressing when you talk about it like that. But the whole point of this podcast is to shift focus, because with that sad realization that the trade was so big and you guys shifting your focus and your strategy, could you describe what the next steps were to making this holistic approach to trying and attempting to stop the wildlife trade? I believe you had like a triangle approach with a couple different goals or strategy areas.
Mm-hmm, yes. So basically what we did is, so how we stop this problem? Or maybe not stop it, because I think we were realistic to know that maybe the problem will never completely stop, but how we reduce the problem. Yeah, we first, obviously, as I have been explaining, we were receiving slow lorises, rehabilitating them, reintroducing back to the wild. I think the effect or the role of these rescue centers is in tackling the problem of illegal wildlife trade is undoubtful, because without a place where authorities can take the animals that they confiscations and law enforcement efforts don't happen. So the role of the rescue centers, and I say this out loud and I highlight this because there's always a lot of criticism from conservationists against wildlife rescue centers, the efforts in support the authorities to and to motivate authorities to conduct more law enforcement efforts is absolutely indispensable. Without these rescue centers, law enforcement doesn't happen. So that was the first big part of this triangle approach. The other one was the education and, basically just all of the education, socialization, and basically trying to change people's attitudes and behavior. And we did that through a lot of campaign and campaigning, social media campaigns. We were also basically involved in influencers and famous people and just to create more awareness about slow lorises. Unfortunately, a lot of people, even those who were buying slow lorises in the market, didn't know what a slow loris was. So it was really important to create all of this publicity about slow lorises. The other important aspect of this education was actually connected to the law enforcement, which is the third kind of component of this triangle approach, and it's the law enforcement itself. So it's all kind of interconnected because, as I said at the beginning, the sanctuary was providing an opportunity for law enforcement efforts to happen. The law enforcement efforts were also helping us to create a narrative around the illegal wildlife trade. If you trade in animals, you can go to jail. And, and that was one of the strongest kind of messages that we could use for our campaigns. So then kind of retrofitting back to the law enforcement and to the reduce of the demand. So, these kind of three components were super interconnected, and the law enforcement started to happen because authorities had a place where to put the lorises, and because more people were being kind of we were making people to be scared of trading in slow lorises. So this is then how the cycle could be completed.
So I think there's often also I'd say a negative perception about often governments and authorities acting on the wildlife trade. But it sounds like you've developed really amazing relationships that you enable each other to act on laws, but also to look after animals. How responsive were the authorities and communities and people on social media once you started this campaign? Were they happy that you were changing tack? Were they hard to get on board to begin with, or were they thankful, oh my God, finally we can act on something?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think the government agencies were really happy that somebody could be there on the ground to help with confiscated animals. You can imagine that is something in itself that is quite a huge responsibility and is quite overwhelming for the authorities when they confiscate a number of animals and they have nowhere to put them. And that is quite discouraging too. And I think that is one of the demotivators of why sometimes authorities don't want to confiscate animals, right? So that was a very motivating effect in the authorities. Then we also had these law enforcement efforts that, putting people in prison, criminalizing the trade of slow lorises, that actually we could bring back into the social media in communication and newspapers, in a lot of media efforts to really show to people what happened when you were trading slow lorises. So then again, this created some deterrent effect on reducing the demand. So yeah, I think, in my opinion, the answer to the problem of wildlife trade is actually on this or any other holistic approach, how we actually look at the problem from not one perspective. Maybe if you only do law enforcement, but you forget about the other components, might not be successful. But also at the same time, if you only do education or education and awareness, that might also not be enough. I think it has to be a collaborative, holistic approach.
You've got to think of all the different aspects so that everyone can actually play their role and actually reduce the trade. So I guess the big question is, after this change of tack, how successful was this? What changes did you see in the dynamics of trade, in the animals that were coming into your rescue center, or the slow lorises that were coming into your rescue center? Was it successful?
Well, first of all, we started to see reducing the demand, reducing the number of people that were keeping slow lorises as pets, reduce the number of lorises that were coming to the center. But I think one of the most clear milestones, it was to tackle the organized crime in slow lorises. When we were talking about all of these confiscations, big confiscations, there were mafia involved in the shipment of large number of slow lorises that, well, they are small animals that have not a high price in the market, but when they had big shipment of slow lorises, then obviously it becomes quite profitable. So all of this organized crime was basically disappeared, and we never ever had any more big confiscations. Well, it's been now a few years that we haven't had any big confiscations. That said, we haven't really stopped the problem of the trade overall, because I can tell you there are still people trading slow lorises also online, but now it's one or two. It's not 50, 100 or 200 in one time.
That's such an incredible statistic. Like to say that again, like you're not seeing large confiscations. Like to stamp out organized crime is absolutely a huge success. Like, yeah, I think you said before, you may never stop the trade, but it seems like successfully you've massively limited the number of animals coming into the trade, which is, I think, an absolutely amazing achievement.
And the other huge achievement is that since, for the last few years, we have never received slow lorises with cut teeth anymore. So, and again, that this is, obviously the cutting of the teeth of the slow loris is a horrible thing. And possibly because there was no confiscations of large numbers of them, where I believe that the traders will cut the teeth so that then the animals wouldn't bite each other and, kind of kill each other. When we, maybe because now there's no big shipments of slow lorises, there's no, cutting of teeth. So that means that when we receive them at the center and they have their teeth, they have more chances to be rehabilitated and released back into the wild. While before, we, all of these big confiscations of large numbers of slow lorises that had to stay in the center forever and, in a sanctuary. And we have been quite overwhelmed with hundreds of slow lorises that needed long-term care at the center.
Yeah, I'm just in awe. It's such an amazing lesson that many people in rescue centers in conservation can can learn from is like, yes, you may never fully stop the trade, but you can significantly decrease it. And it sounds like you stop these large confiscations, you stop seeing them in markets. There is still trade. So I just wanted to touch on another thing is that, have you noticed a change in the dynamics of wildlife trade? So I think that it's been commonly talked about, especially since COVID, when all these markets were shut down and people were in quarantine and whatnot, or lockdowns, people started trading online. Have you noticed an uptick again in maybe the trade of slow lorises or the wildlife trade in general in Indonesia using online platforms as mechanisms? Like, has it changed?
Well, no, I mean, absolutely. I think the effect of online trade is completely changed the game. We've seen this even before the pandemic, obviously, because one of the things that, throughout all of this period of these 15 years working on stopping the trade of slow lorises, we've monitored the trade quite in depth, looking at markets, looking at social media and platforms that sell wildlife online, and we saw it very clearly when once we stopped seeing them in markets being sold offline, there was a massive increase of slow lorises being sold online, and now it's mostly only online, and I think one of the huge problems of these online platforms is that at first it makes it really anonymous because you never know who is behind this online trade. But also the effect, and again, I mentioned it at the beginning, how people, sometimes just random people that don't know anything about animals and, they don't really particularly care, they see cute animals and they see influencers offering animals, they see people that they look up or having animals, wild animals as pets or exotic pets, and that creates influences that motivates people to want to have wild animals as pets. So I think this is a huge task that we all have, because we're talking not only in Indonesia, I think across the world, how we stop these online social media platforms allowing to show wild animals being kept as pets or being on sale.
And which is, it's ironic because many of these platforms within their community standards and their guidelines expressly say, we do not allow the sale of wildlife. Yet it is so openly visible. I think anyone listening to, don't go and do it, but anyone listening could very easily jump online and find something for sale that shouldn't be for sale. And so you've done fantastic work to slow the trade in markets and the organized crime, but it has shifted, sadly, online slightly as well. Are you developing programs and strategies in working to try and stop the trade online?
Well, I have to say that when we saw this massive increase in the sale of slow lorises online, then we shifted, obviously, our strategy to do a lot more online efforts, and all of this kind of communication strategy that I mentioned before, basically trying to show people what happens when there are law enforcement efforts, people put in prison. We managed to get somebody arrested and was sentenced to nearly 5 years sentence, which is the maximum sentence for wildlife crime, and that was a major achievement as well, and a milestone, because that helped our efforts to educate people, and we also saw a decrease on the online trade of slow lorises, and probably I would say, I mean, we continue to monitor the slow loris trade in online platforms is reduced massively. It continues to be there, but it's much more under control now. And how we will see a complete stop of animal salt online, it will be when these social media companies really take part and take the responsibility and for and make real steps to stop it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's still fantastic to hear, though, that you're not seeing as many lorises as you were. So you've really, online, in markets, with organised crime, you've really slowed the trade through this amazing, multifaceted approach. And to plug one of Asia for Animals working groups, we do have a social media animal cruelty coalition. So if anyone listening is interested, you can see some of the reports and some of the work that this coalition does under Asia for Animals. And they have direct contacts with the people in Meta, which is Facebook and Instagram, and on TikTok, etc., to try and really highlight that even though it goes against these platforms' community standards, they're allowing it to happen in the open. So there is work happening with Animals Asia's and partners like Yari in Indonesia to actually make the social media platforms really aware of it. So if anyone wants more information on that, they can go to the Asia for Animals website and the social media animal cruelty page. So do you think this model that you have implemented with slow lorises specifically can be applied to other species to also help stop the trade?
I think obviously there are lessons to be learned for sure, and I'm sure that, well, as I said from the beginning, one of the keys was the holistic approach. Maybe what we've done is not replicable to all species of animals on the trade, because I think there are there are differences between some species and others, and I explained this. Slow lorises are animals that have not a very high value. Maybe it's different when we talk about animals like, I don't know, like tigers or elephants and animals that have a really that from the point of view of profit, it's a lot harder to just use this approach, because then the economic incentive plays a very important role, right? So I don't say that the approach that we've used might work for every single species, but I'm pretty sure that it will definitely work with some of them. And, and I think maybe the key is to really try to focus efforts on specific species that, where we get to understand the complexities, we understand the different features of the trade in a specific species, and try to tackle, more specific, with more specific and targeted efforts.
So I think that's a really good lesson for any of the NGOs or rescue centers who may be listening to this. Do you have any other advice for those organizations who are dealing with the wildlife trade in how to start looking at stopping the trade in a particular species that they may work with?
Well, I think it's very hard, because I know that a lot of the wildlife rescue centers are so busy and overwhelmed with having to treat animals, having to rescue animals. I mean, the wildlife rescue efforts are so tough. I mean, I really have all my sympathy for anyone who is running a rescue center where you have to be 24 hours on call, 365 days a year. You can't stop working. You have to take care of these animals every day. And, sometimes it's really hard to even have the time to think of the holistic approach and the bigger picture. I completely understand. And I believe that not all organizations might have the resources to really go there and really tackle the root problems. But But, as much as possible, maybe collaborating with other organizations. I think there should be more collaboration, I mean, maybe there is an organization that is really good in the rescue efforts and the, kind of rehabilitating animals and helping the law enforcement, while another organization can help more from the law enforcement aspect, or another organization through education, and maybe just create more collaboration where the role of the wildlife sanctuaries is very clear, because without them, I mean, the law enforcement doesn't work, but also sometimes the education and the awareness doesn't work. So, try to, maybe motivate more collaboration amongst the different organizations.
I think that's a really fantastic point of view. More united, the united voice that we can have for animals, and working together to share the horrendous burden that is the wildlife trade is a way moving forward. I think even you sharing these lessons and this amazing glimmer of hope in Indonesia for other centers to go, like, nothing is in vain, and you can make a significant effort for animals, for their welfare and for their conservation. Okay. Finally, just to wrap us up today, I like to always ask a couple more final questions. Could you share with us one really happy or beautiful moment you've had working with maybe a particular slow loris, or something in your career or your time working with animals where you've gone, wow, this is amazing, this is beautiful? Because sometimes it is, you can get bogged down in the tragedy of it. When's been a moment in your career with animals where you've smiled and you've said, we're doing something fantastic, we've made a difference? And the other question, which may time into it, is, do you have a call for action for our listeners who may not be in a wildlife rescue center or an NGO, who may be in the general public? What can they do to help wildlife and lorises, or to make a difference?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. The good moment. There was a particular slow loris, and actually, yeah, it's been one of the oldest slow lorises in our center, Yayasan, which in one of the local Indonesian Dayak languages means hope. And it was a slow loris that we received from the wildlife trade. I mean, had been kept as a pet. And when we received it, and I'm talking about a rescue that happened in 2008, so really long time ago, Yayasan had really horrible infection in the gums. The whole mouth was like full of pus, and obviously it was not in a good shape, and that was one of the first lorises that we rescued, and had also some wounds that seemed like bite wounds, that had some necrotizing tissue and stuff, and was, yeah, I mean, really looking in really bad shape. And Yayasan not only pulled through, but actually survived with us for more than 15 years. And yeah, and we lost him just recently. I believe it was 2022, I believe. But after being with us for a very long time, being a quite happy, healthy slow loris, and it's quite amazing to see the resilience of these animals. Yeah, how the willingness to survive even in the most adverse conditions, and going through pain and suffer. And I think when they have such a big will to survive, I think we should also get this energy to stay there for them, to be there for them, and to do as much as we can to save them.
That is Such a beautiful way to end the podcast. And did you have a call of action for our listeners to help wildlife? What can they do?
Well, it depends who our listeners are, but I think what is quite terrible is that for us, the people, the practitioners that are working every day to save animals, that dedicating our lives to save animals, the forest, and everything, and to save the planet, kind of thing, and we are such a tiny fraction of the population. And it's just, it's so unfair, because what we are doing is benefiting not only us, it's benefiting the entire population, the entire humanity. There has to be more effort from people, from everybody else, it's like as tiny as you can, whatever people can do to help, at least not to make the problem worse. I think, obviously one of the problems is of wildlife trade is people wanting to have exotic animals as pets. I don't believe that exotic animal people will be listening to us today, so I think it's very difficult. But if they were, I will tell them to please not, to reconsider it. But maybe also kind of a general public, it's like everybody can help. Everybody can, you don't have to go all the way to a foreign country in the other side of the world to help animals directly, but there's always something that you can do to help. You can, whatever your job is, how you can contribute, you can volunteer, you can assist with the things that, sometimes we find difficult, we don't have access to expertise that maybe, people around the world can help us with. And I think it's just maybe just contribute. It actually feels good, it's helping others and helping other animals, helping the planet. It feels good. So it's just do it for you, even if it's only just for you.
I think that's fantastic. You're like, you know what, be selfish and do something for yourself, because it does feel good. And the environment will benefit. One final note is I think one of the most amazing things about this story also is you have all the data and the scientific literature to back all up what you're saying and how effective your campaign was. You went into a lot more detail in the presentation you gave at our conference. So if anyone is interested in listening to more of the research side of things and the data side of things in the background, they can go to the Asia for Animals YouTube page. And if you type in Karmele and Slow Loris, it'll pop up instantly. But if you want more information about the work of Yari in Indonesia and around the world, head to internationalanimalrescue.or.id, or you can find the link to them through the asiaforanimals.com website. Karmele, thank you so much for sharing such a positive news story for conservation, for our forests, for the welfare of these incredible animals. And I hope our listeners get a nice feel good, because quite often we don't hear really good news stories in the animal world. So thank you so much for sharing this positive outcome and this glimmer of hope for the future.
Yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity, for giving us the opportunity to share our experience, and hope it can be, something to motivate more effort, more action to help animals. They deserve it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much again, and thank you for the work that you're doing to help animals in Indonesia. Thank you very much, Karmele, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. You can find everything you need to know about our work and connect with us at asiaforanimals.com. Tune in for the next episode. Asia for Animals Coalition, a united voice for Asia's animals.